So we're going to talk about how to break out of the pack, and I am assuming that a lot of you are either already on your entrepreneurial journey or want to start it soon. And I was sitting right where you're sitting just a couple years ago, dreaming about what my entrepreneurial journey would be. And now I run a company that's one of the top 500 most trafficked websites in the world. We get 20 million people a month coming to DocStock.com. We've helped millions and millions of small businesses. And we've got a growing organization of now 40 employees in our office by the beach in Santa Monica, and getting bigger all the time. And what my goal today is the following. If I can share some of the stories from my life and that I've seen from other really successful entrepreneurs to show you how to break out of the pack and get what you want, which is namely to build the business of your dreams, whatever that business is, I feel like that will be an hour well spent. Do you guys agree? Yes. All right. So let's jump into it then. And I'm going to go over a couple different lessons. Number one, and the whole point of this talk, Zig Where Others Zag. We're talking about packs. We're talking about how to break out of that pack. You cannot do what everybody else does and expect meaningfully different results. Right? The quote by Albert Einstein, insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. The entire focus of this talk is going to show you how people that have built successful businesses do things in meaningfully different ways than everybody else. And just from my own personal example, when I was here going to law school, I had first started in business school and then I started going to law school here afterwards. And in my last year, I had the idea for DocStock. And I'd already started a business that I was running in grad school. And my entire last year of grad school, I don't think I went to more than 20% of my classes. Honest to goodness truth. And I didn't buy books, and I didn't study, and I just said to myself and to anyone that would listen, I don't care about grades. I gave up on them. And what I did focus my time on is I spent every day and every night from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. working with a development shop in India that I found that was programming the first version of DocStock, and I was spending every last dime I had in savings. I put money on credit cards. I took out student loans just to pay this off. And people in law school thought I was crazy. They thought I was insane. They would ask me why I was there. I didn't show up to class. What are you doing here? And literally, I was like a leper. Nobody got me. Nobody understood me. And it was a little lonely because I was doing things differently than every single person here at Pepperdine. And guess what? I was the same way in business school. When I was in business school, I didn't care about grades. I cared about building connections to build a business. And what I realized is I had to do things meaningfully different than everybody else. And just ask yourself, how much time are you actually spending doing things differently than everybody else around you? Because if you want to break out of the pack, if you want to get different results, if you want to build a big business, you can't be doing what everyone else is doing. The second thing I realized is sometimes you have to think less. Sometimes thinking is what's going to prevent you from starting the business of your dreams. If I had known how difficult it was going to be to start, run, and grow DocStock, I don't think I would have done it. I did not know what I was getting myself into. I did not know that I was going to be $60,000 in debt when I thought I'd be coming out of school debt-free. I did not know that I would have to call on people to raise $500,000 to keep it alive. I did not know that I would be working 18 hours a day, 6 days a week for 2 years straight. I did not know that I'd have to raise 6 months into raising $500,000, another $3.25 million to keep DocStock alive. Had I known these things, I probably wouldn't have done it. But there's a great parable, and for those of you who haven't read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, I'd recommend it. One of my favorite lines is, the quicker you let go of your old cheese, the sooner you find your new cheese. And Who Moved My Cheese is this fable about two mice and two little people. And every day, there's cheese that shows up there, and they eat their cheese. And they show up to the same spot every day, and their cheese is there. And one day, their cheese is gone. And the two mice kind of banter about, and then they're off. They're looking for new cheese. And the two little people sit there, and they wonder, well, maybe if I come back tomorrow, my cheese will be here. And then they try to rationalize where their cheese went. And they sulk, and they mope, and they whine, and they cry about where did their cheese go. And finally, one of the little people realize, I should be a lot more like my friends, the two mice. Because they didn't think about, why did I lose my old cheese? They just left and went, and they found their new cheese. And sometimes thinking is the enemy of doing. And when you're trying to break out of the pack, your biggest enemy is inertia. You need speed and momentum. And for that, many times you don't need thought. Thought comes later when you find something that is working. Before you have something that's working, go, do, stop thinking. I can promise you all, you're thinking too much about how to be an entrepreneur, and you're not doing enough about being an entrepreneur. The third thing is, stop talking about yourself and others. And there's a great quote that I love that's typically attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt. And it says, great minds talk about ideas. Average mind talk about events. Simple minds talk about people. How much, really, ask yourself, how much of your time do you spend thinking about yourself, the money you want to make, the body you want to have, the people you want to be in a relationship with, and also gossiping about other people? In my experience, that's most of what people think and talk about. And most of you, when I see you after this talk and you come up, you're going to start talking to me about you. Great people, great minds, great entrepreneurs talk about ideas, and they take action on those ideas. Steve Jobs is famous for having this management style. There's this big Apple campus, and part of his management style is that he goes for these long walks, and while he's on these walks, his VPs and the people that report to him get time, and they discuss things while they're on the move. What do you think Steve Jobs was talking about? Do you think he was talking about himself? Do you think he was gossiping about other people at Apple? Or do you think he was talking about this big idea he had to revolutionize the music industry, to revolutionize the film industry, to deliver the most delightful products to people that they've ever seen in their entire life, and then said, hey, this is not enough to talk about these ideas, we're going to take action on them? There's too much of our time that we spend thinking, talking about ourselves, and gossiping about other people. Truly great entrepreneurs, people that break out of the pack, think about ideas, and then take action on them. Mistakes. Repeat them, own them, and then make new ones. Right? There's the adage, don't ever make the same mistake twice. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You're going to have to make the same mistake many times over. Have you ever learned anything new once? If I told you a new sentence in a foreign language, are you going to remember it after I tell you the first time? If I had you play a sport that you've never played before, are you going to get it by doing it one time? No. You have to repeat things over and over again until you internalize that lesson. It's the same thing with mistakes. You're not going to learn from your mistakes the first time. You're going to have to make them a couple times, but make them quickly. And then eventually own those mistakes and stop making them. And move on to new ones. All of life's about making mistakes. You should embrace making mistakes. You should run into making mistakes as quickly as possible. You should be okay repeating mistakes just enough times to never repeat them anymore and then move on to new mistakes you're going to make. And when I first started DocStock, I made every mistake in the book, and I still am. And one of the big ones that I made that it took me not 1, 2, 3, 4 times to learn from was to make sure to appreciate and compliment my employees, the people working for us in the office. I was so driven. I was so nose to the grind. I was so, such a high bar for excellence that nothing was ever good enough. And I never wanted any of the people working in my company to feel like we had done a good enough job. On the day that we launched DocStock, we had 40,000 people come to our website the first day. And my co-founder and the developers who had been working on this site for, months to bring it to life and been pulling all-nighters, we're like, this is amazing. We pulled it off. We launched it. We had all these people. And I was pissed. I was pissed that it wasn't 100,000 people that came to the website. And the folks in my company would tell me over and over again, look, you need to compliment people. You need to ease up a little bit. You need to appreciate people. It's not going to want to make them work less hard. And finally, one day, my co-founder literally pulled me out of my office and took me for a walk. And he's like, Jason, you are being a dick. And you've got to appreciate and validate our employees. This is not sustainable what you're doing. But now I think I spend a lot of time making sure every single employee in our office knows what they're doing well, knows what they're appreciated for. And the critical feedback is always complemented with what we appreciate and validate for the people in our office. To break out of the pack, you should be uncomfortable. All learning, all growth is accompanied by uncomfortability. Think of anything new that you do where you're pushing yourself, stretching your boundaries. It's uncomfortable. It's not comfortable to work out. It's not comfortable to learn a new sport. It's not comfortable to push yourself in business school and learn new classes and topics that you've never had to study before. But uncomfortability is what leads to growth. And breaking out of the pack takes a commitment to growth. And so what I've always tried to do is to purposefully, intentionally, and quite often put myself in uncomfortable situations. When I graduated undergrad, I was supposed to go to law school at the time. I decided I wasn't going to do it, and not for a period of time. I thought, hey, I don't know if I'll ever go. And I told myself and anyone that would listen, I was going to be a motivational speaker. How? I had no idea. Well, a couple months later, I ended up doing 3 things. First, I found a company that would send me to talk to high school students. And listen, I wasn't the cool kid or popular kid in high school, and I would go back to these high schools, and there'd be a gym of 600 kids. And one time I went to an all-girls school, and they were like clapping and cheering. I walked in, and I was like, whoa, what is happening here? I've never had one girl clap or cheer for me, let alone 600. And I would have to give these speeches to these high school students on how to be successful in high school and how to pursue their dreams in college. Listen, if it is terrifying, it is terrifying to have to talk in front of 600 16-year-old girls. I don't think I've ever done anything as frightening in my entire life. I then also found a way to go do seminars on communications and negotiations and sales to people that were, directors in various positions in corporate America. And here I was, 21. I had never had a job in my life. And I was telling these people, hey, here's how you get better at sales. Here's how you get better at negotiations. And all I did was read other people's books and regurgitate these lessons. That's kind of uncomfortable. People would ask me, why are you qualified? Why are you talking to us? And just sat through it. The third thing that I did is I actually took, when I was graduating undergrad, a weekend class that certified me in hypnosis. I am a certified, after one weekend, hypnotherapist. And for 1 hour in that weekend class that cost a whopping $199, there was an hour video on how to do a stage hypnosis show. And I started telling people I knew how to do stage hypnosis shows. I did not know how to do stage hypnosis shows. And eventually somebody asked me, well, will you come do a stage hypnosis show for our school? And I said, sure. And I practiced doing the stage hypnosis show before I did that first one. And it went really badly. I mean, it did not work at all. And I had to walk into a fraternity event in front of 400 people and hypnotize people. That was kind of uncomfortable, let me tell you. But I went on to go do about another 30 of those shows over the course of a year. And so what I've constantly done in my professional career is seek out situations that are really uncomfortable that then lead to growth. And I didn't know at the time when I was talking to 16-year-old high school girls and delivering message about sales to people who've been in the workforce for 30 years and doing stage hypnosis shows, that year of public speaking would be one of the most important things that I ever did to raise $4 million. And you're not going to know how the situations that you put yourself in when you're uncomfortable are going to help you out later down the road, but I promise you they will. When you're breaking out of the pack, forget 80-20. It's 99-1. And of every quote I have on this deck, my favorite one is from my father, who is a big fan of often saying, "Congratulations, Jason. I'll give you a shit medal." "Hey, Dad, I got into business school." "Congratulations, Jason. I'll give you a shit medal." "Hey, Dad, I just started a new company." "Congratulations, Jason. I'll give you a shit medal." And when you have an 82-year-old Persian Jew telling you this, it's, what's going on here? I'm actually afraid one day he will give me a medal made of shit. We've all heard that 80% of the results come from 20% of what we do, the Pareto principle. And you know what? When you've got a big organization and something's working and running, that is true. 80% of the results come from 20% of what you do. But when you're breaking out of the pack, when you're starting your entrepreneurial journey, when you need to create something that doesn't exist, 99% of your results come from one thing that you do. There is one most important thing for you to do in your entrepreneurial journey right now. I don't know what it is, but I know there's one thing. And for us, when I was in law school, and there were all these distractions, and I could have very easily had any good reason to back out why we weren't going to do DocStock, my first one thing was, I am going to get this product launched, and I'm going to get it live on the internet no matter what. That was my first one thing. You know what my next one thing was? I'm going to find a way to make sure that we get lots of traffic. I'm not going to take for granted that here we build it, and then they come. I'm going to do anything and everything I can do in my ability and spend every waking moment figuring out how we're going to get lots of traffic. Guess what? 2 years into DocStock, we had 10 million people a month coming to the website. Then we moved to the next one thing, which is we do not want to have to be beholden to raising money for the rest of our life in DocStock and continue to dilute our ownership stake in this company. We have to find a way to make the company profitable. We have to find a way to make the revenue grow. And if I actually look back on the 5+ year history of DocStock now, there have been about 4 decisions that I made that have led to 99% of our success. Everything else goes by the wayside. When you are starting out, when you're in the beginning, when you're trying to break out of the pack, it's one thing, not many, not 20%, it's one thing that's going to lead to all the most important results you need to get. So focus on that one thing, or else you may be getting a shit medal from me. Be a critical optimist. F. Scott Fitzgerald, it's the sign of a truly intelligent mind that they can hold two opposing ideas at the same time and still to continue to function. I love that quote. I think every politician should have to internalize that quote. The most successful people are simultaneously the most optimistic and the most critical. Just think of Walt Disney. Walt Disney, imagine that you're the investor hearing the pitch, 1940s. I'm going to build this land of puppet animals. And there's going to be rides, and we're going to call it the Land of Disney, Disneyland. And it's going to be the world's most popular attraction ever. You would think this guy is off his rocker. He had to be this optimist that could see things that nobody else could see. But simultaneously, if you read about Disney, if you read his biographies, if you read what other people have written about him, he is one of the most self-critical people you will ever meet. He was constantly trying to improve on things. He was constantly critical of the work that he was putting out, that his company was putting out. And what great people do, people that break out of the pack do, is they have an ability to simultaneously be critical about their own strengths and weaknesses and always want to get better, while portraying and believing in a sense of optimism that they can do anything. Improve every day, Kaizen. This was really popular in the mid to late 80s and early 90s. It was a management technique that came out of Japan. And Kaizen is this idea of continuous improvement. And this philosophy spurred the discipline that revolutionized car manufacturing in Japan in the 80s that then we in the United States tried to incorporate ourselves. And it's the idea that every single day, push yourself to be better. If you had to ask yourself the following question, how much better am I professionally today than what I was a year ago, 5 years ago? Can you really say you're absolutely proud of where you're at today? That you've done everything you can to push yourself as far as you can go? And one of my favorite books is called Talent is Overrated. And it talks about these people throughout history that we believe to be the most gifted amongst us all. Mozart, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods. And we assume that they have these God-given gifts of athleticism or geniusness that separates them from everybody else. But what the research shows is that's not true at all. That in many ways, they are no different than a lot of the other people that are their counterparts. What makes them special is not their talent, but a systematic, disciplined approach to practice that constantly pushes them outside of their boundaries. Jerry Rice was not the greatest wide receiver because he was just more physically gifted than anyone. Jerry Rice was the greatest wide receiver because he had a practice regimen that was insane. And every week, every year, he constantly pushed himself to do new things that he didn't know how to do. And most of us, when we do things and practice things, we do what we're good at. And we get incrementally better at the things we're already good at. What we don't do is push ourselves in new and meaningful ways. And Mozart, what the research shows, wasn't just this child savant. Mozart had a father who himself was an amazing pianist and composer, right? An extremely driven and an extremely disciplined teacher. And by the age of 3, Mozart had already practiced more hours than people 4 or 5 times his age. And in a way that was so systematically rigorous and disciplined that it created what we believe is genius. It's not genius. It's a commitment to improve every single day in the most meaningful ways, and not just doing the things we're already good at, but pushing ourselves to do new things. Everyone here, we're all familiar with the ends justify the means. I like to flip the script on that and say the means will justify the end. The ends justify the means is, hey, there's this thing that's so important that I want so much, so badly, that I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to that result. The means justifies the ends is about do things right, enjoy the process, enjoy the entrepreneurial journey, and the ends will materialize. And what's important about this more specifically, and we all know the adage, follow what you love, follow your passion, and the success will come. But what really successful entrepreneurs do is they're better than anyone else at working in flow. And you all know what that is. When you're in flow, it's an activity that you're doing that you are so concentrated on that you lose track of time. So just think of the activities that you do where you lose track of time. Is it reading? Is it working out? Is it writing? Is it working on a group project? Is it brainstorming ideas? What are the things that you do where you're in flow and you just lose track of time? That's what the entrepreneurial journey is about. It's about living in those moments, because that's what success and happiness is really about. And Tony Hsieh, who is the founder of Zappos, talks about this a lot and has a great book about happiness, and he talks about flow being one of the key components to being happy. And my recommendation is if you want to break out of the pack and have this big successful life, don't focus on the end, focus on the means. Focus on enjoying the journey, focus on being in flow, and you'll see those ends materialize. So now we get to kind of my last 3 points about how to break out of the pack, and these are maybe a little bit less business specific and a little bit more personal, and we'll call it meta world peace. So the first thing is, the first of these last 3 points, I think all of self-improvement is really just 2 questions. All of self-improvement. You can take every self-improvement book, you can take every ideology, you can take every seminar, and for me it boils down to 2 questions. The first of those questions being, what are you pretending not to know? And my best friend told me this about 2 years ago, and when he said it, it just struck me like a lightning bolt. Jason, what are you pretending not to know? William Shakespeare, to thy own self be true. No improvement can be made, no breaking out of a pack can be made until we first are willing to ask ourselves and be honest about what are we pretending not to know? That our health is bad, that we're not working on the things that we should, that we're incongruent in our lives, that we're not actually the person that we say we are and portray others to be? The second question is, why aren't we doing the things that we know we should be doing? We know what to do. We know we should be eating well. We know we should be working hard. We know we should be treating the people we love with kindness and respect. We know that we should be focusing not only on ourselves but others. We know that we should love ourselves and do things to improve our own life and the people we care about most. Life's not about figuring out what to do. Life's about figuring out, why don't we do those things we know we should be doing? And the people that I know that are the most successful and really are differentiated than everyone else I know live those 2 questions and constantly seek to improve themselves on those 2 questions. Don't be an extra in your own movie. My absolute favorite quote of all time is by Theodore Roosevelt, and it's most widely known as The Man in the Arena. And it talks about, it's not the critic who counts, it's the man in the arena, the person that, even if he fails, does so by triumphantly daring to do something great. And when he succeeds, knows the victory that no one else will know. but in either case is not that hapless bystander that knows neither the pains of defeat nor the glory of victory. And I'd recommend that all of you go look up Man in the Arena, Theodore Roosevelt, and read it today. And I like to think of my life as a movie. And just think of the following. At some point, all of our lives are going to be done. They're going to be finished. And whatever you think happens afterwards, this life is one complete work. And there's a start, and there's a middle, and there's an end. And that's your movie. Are you an extra in your movie? Does your story happen and you just happen to be there? Are the main characters and actors not you, but all the people around you, and you're just a background event in the scene? Or are you really taking control of your story? Are you shaping your movie? Are you the director and decide what today's scene is and what the next experience is? Are you the star of that movie where you get the glory when things go well? And I feel like too many of us, too often, are just extras in our own movie. When we should be the directors, we should be the stars, we should be the producers. And realize that we can shape our movie to be anything that we want it to be. And truly exceptional people that break out of the pack, that's what they think. That's what they act on. That they can shape their destiny to be anything that they want it to be. My last point is not so much about us individually. It's a little bit more of a meta one. And the question is, can you be the 100th monkey? And there's a story I'd like to share with you. And it's a true story. There's an island in Japan called Koshima. And it's inhabited with monkeys. And there are multiple islands around the area that are inhabited with monkeys as well. And in 1952, some scientists were running an experiment. And they would drop in sweet potatoes onto the island of Koshima. And the monkeys loved these sweet potatoes. There wasn't anything on the island that tasted like them. They were very sweet. But they dropped them in the sand. And so they had a bitter texture to them. And eventually one day, one of the monkeys, she was very smart, and she walked over to the ocean, and she bathed her sweet potato in the water and realized it didn't have a bitter taste at all afterwards. And slowly but surely, some of the monkeys started following suit, copying her behavior. And it was about 6 years in, it was 1958, and about half the monkeys on this island were following suit, and they'd go take these sweet potatoes and wash them, and then they'd eat them. But it seemed like the older monkeys were more set in their ways. They didn't really want to change what they were doing. They kind of kept to the way they were. And then inexplicably and suddenly, and we don't know exactly the number of monkeys, but for the purpose of the story, let's say it was the 100th monkey that then followed suit and washed a potato for the first time. Completely inexplicably, after that 100th monkey started washing the sweet potato the same way as everyone else, almost instantly, every single other monkey on the island followed suit. And every monkey on the island started washing their sweet potatoes before they ate them. And what was it? What was it about that tipping point, that 100th monkey, that then caused all the other monkeys to follow suit? But that's not the really interesting thing. The really crazy thing was that on an island a couple miles away, separated by water, with no communication between that island and Koshima, almost instantly and simultaneously, all of the monkeys on that island started washing their sweet potatoes in the water. And there's something that happens when a behavior, when an idea, when a movement becomes prevalent enough that it becomes part of our collective consciousness, the part of the way that we all do things. For the last 50 to 100 years, there hasn't been any desire for democracy or representative government in the Middle East, and now all of a sudden in a period of a year where countries that don't talk to each other or really have any big trade relations, they're all simultaneously wanting to have representative governments in the Middle East. And part of breaking out of the pact is not just our own ability to manifest the things that we want, but hopefully all of us in our lives will focus on how do we make this institution, how do we make this country, how do we make this world a better place. And we'll have to not only move ourselves, but we'll have to move the pack. And that's not an easy thing to do. But I would encourage each of you to think about is that any of us could be that 100th monkey. That person that by doing that deed, thinking that way, representing ourselves in a certain light, moves everybody else, creates a collective consciousness, and not only affects our own life and our own entrepreneurial journey, but has the ability to affect thousands or millions of people around us. And that's in part my goal. That's what I want to do in my life. And that's why I'm here today. And I don't think there's anything that I've said that you haven't heard before. And I don't think there's anything that I told you that you didn't know. I'm just hoping that I might be the 100th monkey and help some of you fulfill your entrepreneurial journey. So thanks for having me today.